Today we're going to learn how to take this and turn it into something like this. One of the simplest but most important techniques you can learn on guitar is vibrato. It can take a very amateur, almost garage demo sounding kind of lead and turn it into something that is polished and professional and emotionally connected. And because vibrato is something that is unique from one player to another, it also helps develop your sound and your style with the way that you do vibrato on the strings. And you can see a wide variety of it from player to player. You have guys like B.B. King, Steve Vai, George Lynch with some of his wild sliding vibratos. And these are all very different things. And of course, some of the basic vibratos you do in between are going to be a little more generic, but you're still going to find your own voice within that. And that's why it's important to start working on it early. Now, there's a few ways you can approach vibrato. Well, 4 that I'm going to cover here today. And let's get started with that. And we'll start with the most basic one, which is just the micro bend, I guess you could call it, bending the string up and down vibrato. So to do this vibrato, you're essentially doing the same thing you do when you do a string bend. So if I do a bend here, all the way up from D to E, I can do a vibrato just by bending a tiny bit, a micro bend out of tune. You know, that awful sounding sound that you don't want if you do it slow, but you do it quick, up and down. And whatever speed you do it at starts to become part of your style, whether you're a slow vibrato guy or you do those real quick B.B. King style or any mix thereof. And sometimes even when you have a slow vibrato, when you're on stage and you got the stage fright, you're shaking and it starts to sound goofy like that.
Stage fright.
But depending on which string you do it on or which finger you're using, you may bend up or down. I tend to, with a third finger and on lower strings or higher strings towards the floor, bend up. When I use my first finger, I tend to bend down, pull it down. You got your thumb locked in here and you're almost pivoting like this with that first finger. With the third finger, you notice I've got more than one string engaged sometimes. I'm not just trying to do it with one finger. There's not a lot of strength there. I've got a couple down. I sometimes lay this finger across the strings to deaden them out so I don't get string noise. You could also pull down instead of up, like I said. And you can do both up and down. I don't use that much, but it gets a kind of boingy cool sound. So fast. It almost sounds like a cartoon, but you may find use for that yourself, or doing it at different speeds have a different effect. So again, bending either up or down, whichever's comfortable for you, and depending on the position and where you are on what string. Obviously on the first string you can't bend down, you'll pull it off the fretboard. And over here you can't bend up on the 6th string, you have to bend down. It falls into place logically for you. Now let's look at technique number 2. Here you're going to do a vibrato side to side. This is more of a classical player's type of vibrato where you're just moving within the fret itself. So I might start here at the back of the fret and move up towards the front of the fret, or low, high. Getting a little bit of buzz there you can hear if you're not careful with it. Now this is a very mellow vibrato, especially on a fretted instrument. I guess in classical music it's come out of people playing violin or cello and instruments where there's no frets. And you can actually make a vibrato that way. And there's very little here. And some of that, I think, comes from imperfections and pressure, because I can press down towards and get a little bit of vibrato pressing into the neck, which is almost a technique of itself. And I might be bending it a little bit, but you do see players use this side-to-side vibrato. Now, if you want to get really crazy with it, I'd have to kind of dial up a metal sound for this, but I'll do it just quickly for you with the sound I have dialed in. But let's look at who's doing it really well first, and that's George Lynch. Okay, so same clip you saw in the beginning there, and this is just actually sliding multiple frets to get a vibrato effect out of it. It's almost like a whammy bar, but with your hand. And I land there and I go down to here, up to here. So it's... So out of context like that, it sounds kind of weird, but when you throw it into a high energy piece, like we showed in the clip there, it can work really well. Now, the third type of technique is what's called the circular vibrato. This is something that I first saw Steve Vai doing. I don't know how many other people use it. It's basically a combination of techniques of the sliding back and forth on the fret and bending. So you're bending maybe here at the bottom and then sliding up towards the top as you come back down. It's more complicated to do. It's something that Steve talked about as a means to watch out for when you're doing a bend vibrato, the first style vibrato, not bending out of key, because you tend to bend, you pull the string, and you never come all the way back to the pitch. So your median pitch goes out of key, and when you're doing a vibrato, you can start to sound like your guitar's out of tune. And so the circular vibrato for him is a way to mitigate that problem. But again, it's a very simple technique at its core, but it does take some more practice, and that is to bend up, slide, come down, slide, and keep going back in what ends up being a circle. And finally, for the fourth technique, this is one of my favorites to use, and it's something that I saw Yngwie Malmsteen do quite a bit, and other people have done it, but he's the first guy I caught doing it. And that is, if you have this little piece of equipment right here, the whammy bar or the tremolo arm, to use that as your actual device for vibrato. Gotta watch when you grab it, you hear it boings there, right? Especially if you have problems with vibratos on bends like that, you can do it with the bar. And it allows you to have a vibrato that goes down in pitch instead of up like a bend. So when, again, with the first vibrato, I'm pulling it up and I'm sharpening the pitch. With the bar, I can go down and lower the pitch. And so if you like that going down in pitch instead of going up, it can have more of a kind of saxophone quality to my ears anyway. It's an option for you when you have the tremolo arm. And speaking of going down in pitch, I forgot to mention on technique number 1 there, I want to come back to that. When you're doing a bend and you want to add vibrato, it's simply a matter of coming down in pitch a little bit off the bend and going back. So if I have a bend from an A to a B here, I can just come down a little bit and then back up. That one can take a little bit of work too, because a lot of beginning players, when you come back down off of the bend a little bit and go back up, you will be out of pitch. You don't bend up high enough again, or you overshoot the mark. So it definitely takes some practice. So there are the 4 basic ways that you can approach vibrato. Technique number 1 is by far the most common. And it's okay to use any combination of all of these, but it does take some time to get it down. It's something you want to work on early when you're playing, early in your development. And when you're just playing leads or simple melodies, work on a very basic, simple melody like I showed in the examples here. And every time you stop and pause on a note or hold a note, do some kind of vibrato, and do this until it gets to the point where it's second nature. Within a couple months of doing that, you won't have to think anymore about your vibrato. You're just going to play it naturally when you stop. It'll be part of your style. And of course, you don't need it on every note. There are times when it's not necessary, but you will find that in most instances, it takes a very amateur sounding lead and turns it into something polished. So as always, guys, if you have any questions or further comments, ideas, things you'd like to see me cover more, please leave them in the comments below. I get back to everyone as soon as I can. Until next time, keep making great music. Hey friends, don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications. It makes the whole world better.